They found themselves outnumbered, 1 against 3, an old Ukrainian T-64BV facing off against 3 modern Russian T-72B3 tanks from the 2022 batch. Everyone's heard the legend of how, during Operation Desert Storm, on February 26, 1991, American Abrams tanks wiped out an entire company of Iraqi T-72s near 73 Easting in just a few minutes. Back then, the Americans had total superiority, both in technology and training. But Ukraine is a different story. Here, Americans serve as regular volunteers. They don't fight in Abrams tanks, but in whatever the Ukrainian Armed Forces have. Most often, the T-64BV, a tank designed back in the 1960s. And they're not facing confused Iraqi conscripts. They're up against the Russian army, considered the second most powerful military in the world. So the Ukrainian T-64BV is an old warhorse from the 60s, light, maneuverable, with a tough frontal armor. Its strength lies in cunning tactics and ambushes. The Russian T-72B3 is newer and meaner. It's not the outdated T-72M used by Iraq, but a heavily modernized version equipped with advanced sights, thermal imaging, and digital systems. At range, the T-72B3 sees farther and shoots first, if given the chance. Tank-on-tank duels are rare in this war, but in this footage, you'll witness some of the most jaw-dropping encounters. Let's start with how the American gunner took apart the Russian tanks. It all began when a group of 3 Russian tanks tried to dig in at a village near Pokrovsk. Unlike the Iraqi T-72Ms, the Russian T-72B3s have modern thermal sights and digital targeting systems that allow for precision even at night. The Ukrainian crew had intel that a group of Russian tanks was moving toward the village. Their plan was simple: take position in the tree line along the road, ambush the enemy, and force the Russian tanks to retreat. But the enemy got there first. The Russian tanks took control of the road and adjacent field to support their infantry during assaults and to repel Ukrainian counterattacks. That's why the T-64BV rolled into action practically on the move, coming face-to-face with the T-72B3s at a distance of just 500 yards. But before the Ukrainians could fire the first shot, something slammed into their tank: an FPV drone. Damn. Fortunately, the T-64BV's frontal armor is multi-layered with composite materials. Add that to the Contact 1 explosive reactive armor, and the overall resistance jumps to the equivalent of 750 to 800 millimeters against heat rounds. Against the warhead of an FPV drone, that kind of armor is a solid wall. Contact 1 consists of containers with explosive elements that detonate when struck by a shaped charge, disrupting the focused jet and drastically reducing its penetration power. But the Russian drone operator didn't aim at the tank's heavily protected front. He went for the side, where the standard rolled steel armor is no more than 80 millimeters thick. But here's what happened next. In a tank duel, it's like a street fight. Whoever lands the first hit wins, and luck was on the Ukrainian side. Their very first shot turned one of the T-72s into a fireball, going up like a barrel of gasoline. Here, the design of the ammo rack played a key role, something traditional in Soviet and Russian tank schools. The shells are stored directly under the turret in the autoloader. This setup speeds up the rate of fire, but it's deadly if the tank is penetrated. If the shaped charge jet reaches the ammo rack, the tank instantly turns into a fireball. The crew stands almost no chance of surviving such a hit. That's why, after the first successful shot from the Ukrainians struck the Russian T-72's weak spot, it became a pile of burning metal. Both tanks are equipped with almost identical guns, a Soviet 125mm caliber. If the Russian return shot had landed squarely, the T-64BV would have likely gone up in flames as well. But no return fire came. It seems the Russians simply couldn't see their target. Their drone, hovering above the battlefield, should have been guiding them, but the connection either failed or was lost, leaving the Russian crews essentially blind. On the other hand, the Ukrainians were getting timely orders from their battalion commander, allowing them to strike with impunity. The second shot missed, but by the fourth, the American gunner took down a second T-72. For some reason, the crew of the second T-72 kept circling around their burning comrade. It seems they were convinced they were under fire from an ATGM, anti-tank guided missile. The Ukrainians took 6 shots. After every 2 shots, the Ukrainian tank moved a few meters. Before long, 2 Russian tanks were burning like bonfires on the battlefield. The third released a smoke screen and, without engaging in combat, retreated. Seems like a well-deserved victory for the Ukrainians, doesn't it? Hit the like button if you agree. But what if, instead of the old Ukrainian T-64, the best American tank, the Abrams, had been in the fight? Things would have gone very differently. The crew of an Abrams tank sees farther. The Abrams' thermal imager can spot targets from miles away. It shoots accurately, and its cannon hits so hard that even the Russian tank's frontal armor wouldn't be enough to stop it. The uranium in the Abrams' armor, along with layers of steel and ceramic, would stop even the newest Russian rounds. So far, there haven't been any documented duels between Abrams and Russian tanks on the battlefield in Ukraine. Some American media outlets even reported that the Ukrainian army has kept the Abrams farther away from the front lines to prevent them from being destroyed. Indeed, the Ukrainians often use American tanks for shooting from concealed positions. Look, this Abrams fires 3 shots in 19 seconds. That's actually a bit faster than what's considered an excellent result. The crew's task is to destroy the enemy's firing positions and render them useless. And as you can see, the 120mm gun does an excellent job of that. The career of the British Challenger 2 tank has also been struggling in this war. While some experts still claim the Challenger 2 is the 5th strongest Western tank. For example, the Challenger 2 can reverse at 15.5 miles per hour. Imagine how quickly this tank can back up, firing, and releasing a smoke screen. But nope. The reason for the Challenger 2's failure lies in its rifled gun. Yes, it shoots farther and more accurately, but it's more sensitive to wear. The rifling inside the barrel deteriorates over time. The second problem with the Challenger 2 concerns its ammunition. The British rifled gun uses special shells. Can't load standard NATO shells into it. So, on one hand, the Challenger 2 has excellent accuracy and range, but on the other, it can't fully utilize its strengths. That's why you won't see any duels involving the Challenger 2. However, there are plenty of jaw-dropping clashes between German and Russian tanks. Let's not forget the Abrams and Leopard are cousins. Both use the same L-55 type gun. The Leopard 2A4 tank took up a good position and started operating like a shooting range. The first shot, 1 Russian tank down. The second, an APC goes up in flames. Then 2 more fighting vehicles and a motorcycle catch fire. Russian equipment burned and the infantry hid in a tree line. But they were already waiting for them. UAV operators. It's unlikely anyone managed to escape. The result of this slaughter? 47 Russian stormtroopers down, 2 tanks, 1 APC, and 3 combat vehicles. Oh, and 1 motorcycle. That's what choosing the right position can do. But just as important is the German gun and the modern fire control system. The crew of this Ukrainian Leopard 2A6 didn't expect to run into a pair of Russian tanks. They were likely heading across the Ukrainian steppe to well-established firing positions when, at an intersection, they encountered 2 Russian tanks. The gunner reacted instantly, fired, and scored a direct hit. The Russians didn't wait for a second shot, they quickly reversed. But how did the Russian tank survive after a direct hit? It's likely the Ukrainian crew was preparing to engage Russian infantry from a concealed position, but while moving into position they spotted the 2 Russian tanks. There was no time to reload, so a DM-11 was fired instead. It scared the Russians, but ultimately saved their lives because the DM-11 isn't capable of penetrating armor. As you can see, the greatest advantage of Western tanks lies in their ability to detect identify, and engage targets faster and at greater distances than Soviet-era tanks. What's it like to face a Russian tank with absolutely no suitable weaponry? Well, these shots from a Ukrainian village prove that, at the end of the day, it's the human factor that matters most in war. So the crew of the M2 Bradley found themselves in a tough spot. Their path crossed with the mighty Russian T-90M Poryov, the best Russian tank of all time. The Bradley has a strong counter to all types of tanks, the ATGM. But there's a problem. The minimum effective range for it is 70 yards. As you can see, they're clearly well inside that range. The standard 25mm M242 Bushmaster cannon against the T-90's armor is like a mosquito bite to an elephant. But it seems the Ukrainian gunner didn't know that. And it worked. Look, while the 25mm rounds don't penetrate the T-90M's armor, they do shatter all the external targeting equipment into small pieces. Essentially, the Russian tank crew went blind. And they couldn't shoot at the Bradley anymore, especially since the Bradley crew was actively maneuvering. After the turret's rotation mechanism was damaged, the T-90's turret started spinning like it was in a St. Vitus dance. Need I say that trying to escape from a constantly rotating turret is quite problematic. That's why the driver steered the tank toward a tree so the gun would jam against the tree trunk and stop spinning. What happened next? YouTube's policy on graphic content prevents us from showing the whole thing, but let's just say the battle ended with the tank and its crew being destroyed by kamikaze drones. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it. Thanks for watching.